Right. Hello, everyone. So now, in today's lecture, what we are going to discuss is about process costing. So in our previous lessons, we learned some other costing techniques like job costing, batch costing, right? So in today's lesson, we are going to discuss another technique called process costing. So we will learn what this is and we will do some questions from this lesson. Right, moving on. So these are the learning outcomes. You should be able to define process costing, then identify similarities and differences in job and process costing, then identify flow of costs under process costing. So for the flow of costs, we will, of course, do a question and then you will understand what this flow is. Then we will keep accounts for normal loss and scrap. We will identify what these terms are. Then we will not prepare process accounts, but we will learn how to keep these process accounts under weighted average method, OBAC, and FIFO method. Right. Then what exactly is process costing? Can you all take a minute and read this definition? That is very important to understand what process costing is. What do you mean by process costing? Used to ascertain the cost of the product at each process, operation, or stage of a manufacturing process, which involves a sequence of continuous or repetitive operations and processes. So remember, here the operation or the process is continuous or repetitive, right? Next, process costing characteristics. Read these characteristics, that these are very important. You have to understand these characteristics. So here, one main characteristic is, sorry, these units are identical. They are very similar. Okay. So output will be similar. Continuous flow production, never complete. That means when the flow production is there, let's say you have different departments. Okay. So now we are keeping accounts for the process. So process 1 will be happening in department A. Process 2 will be happening in department B. Likewise. So once department A finishes their process, so they will send their finished output, but that is work in process. Okay, their finished output is work in process. They will send their finished output to department B, which is the process 2. Then again, department 2 will process it, work on the product, and then send it to department 3, which is the process 3. So they are sending their finished output, but that is work in progress. So it is not the completed version. Only the last process will send the finished goods. Okay. Then move from process or a department to department, process to process. Right? Right? So what you have to basically understand here is they are moving from process to process. Then costs are accumulated by process for a time period. So now when we do the exercise, you will properly understand what you meant by this. Right? The cost will be accumulated. So process 1 cost will be taken to process 2. Likewise, it will be added. Okay. There. Now, these are the companies and products so which can follow process cost system, right? So the company names are given here. brand names: Elephant House, Coca-Cola, Petroleum Corporation, Intel, Robielac, Multilac, likewise. Then their products are also given here. Soft drinks, Petroleum Corporation's products are oil. Intel and Advanced Micro Devices have computer chips. Robielac and Multilac make it paint, okay, not ink. We'll have paint, right? So these are the products. So they can follow this process costing. That means they have several processes from raw materials to finished goods. They are following different processes, which means there are different departments that are involved in the manufacturing process. Clear? Okay, now similarities. Sorry. In job order and process costing. So what are the similarities? Both systems determine a product cost by measuring the amount of direct materials, direct labor, and allocating overhead costs. Clear? So these both systems. Can you remember in job costing when we were calculating the cost of that particular job? In the exercise, we calculated the cost for job 650, right? So can you remember that we added all the direct costs, direct material, direct labor. Then we added indirect costs like production overheads or manufacturing overheads. So likewise in process costing also, we have to consider direct material, direct labor, and overhead costs. Okay. Then second similarity, allocate overhead using a predetermined overhead rate. Now in job costing, we determined a predetermined base, right, to allocate overheads. Can you remember we used machine hours or labor hours to allocate the uh, determine a base to allocate overheads, right? So that is happening in process costing as well. So we will understand, we will do an exercise, then you will see. So these things are a bit similar. The computations are a bit similar. Third similarity, maintain perpetual inventory records with subsidiary ledgers for materials, work in process, and finished goods. That means, remember, they have the perpetual inventory records with showing. Can you remember in job order costing method, we had the inventory record, job order record report. There we showed everything: material, work in process, finished goods, and everything there. So likewise, in process costing also, we maintain perpetual inventory record. Right, now try to see this and understand the job order cost process and job order costing and process costing systems are given here. Just try to see and identify any changes, differences. Okay, so here, can you all see? This is very important to understand. So in job order cost system, we had different job cost sheets, right? So for these job costs, for these jobs, so we are preparing the cost for particular job. No? So we took direct material, direct labor, factory overheads relating to that particular job, correct? So in process cost system, sorry, in process cost system, we have different processes, right? And then uh, we have to assign these costs to that particular process. We are giving direct material to maybe department A. Then they process and send whatever they complete, the work in progress, to department B, the process 2. Then direct labor and factory overheads are added to that particular process, and then we get finished goods. Clear? The next one. Job order versus process costing. You can read this and understand. So different features are given here, and how that happen in job order cost system and how that happen in process cost system is given here. So you can just read this. It's very easy. Let me explain briefly. Work in process accounts. One for each job in work in process accounts. We have in job order cost system, one for each job. In process cost system, for work in process, we have one account for each process, right? Then when talking about the documents used, in job order cost system, the job cost sheets are used, right? We use job cost sheets, which I showed you during the last lecture, right? Then in process cost system, production cost reports are there, right? In process cost system, the production cost reports are there. Then determination of total manufacturing costs. So in job order cost system, we determine the total manufacturing cost for each job. In process cost system, we determine the total manufacturing cost for that particular period, right? Then unit cost computation. So in job order cost system, we are calculating the total cost for that particular job. No, so that cost, so the cost of each job will be divided by units produced for the job, total number of units produced. Then in process cost system, total manufacturing costs will be divided by the units produced to find out the cost per unit. Okay, read this again, then you will clearly understand. Now, this is very important, the flow of costs. According to these flows, only we are keeping accounts, right? So the double entries will be kept according to this flow. First, for the manufacturing costs, we have raw material, factory labor, manufacturing overheads here, right? That will be given to you in the question. Then we need to assign these manufacturing costs to the processes. Process 1, here according to this flow chart, the process 1 is machining department A. Then process 2 will be the assembly department. So these manufacturing costs first will be assigned to process 1, right? Once the work here is done in process 1, their work in process will be transferred to process 2, which is the assembly department. Not only that, there for that process also, these manufacturing costs will be assigned. raw materials, factory labor, manufacturing overheads, alongside with the work in process that was received from process one, right? Now, once it is completed, now according to this example, there are only two processes. So by the end of second process, the work will be completed. So we will have finished goods, right? Now we are done with work in process. We won't have any more work in process. Therefore, finished goods will be transferred to the finished goods inventory to calculate the cost of goods sold. Is it clear? Here to what I'm saying very clearly, everything I explained uh, in a simple manner, right? Now, assigning material costs, at first what did we do? In manufacturing cost, we assigned material cost, direct labor, and manufacturing overheads, right? Fewer requisition slips than in job orders since materials are for the process rather than specific job. So these things I will just read out, then you will understand. These are very simple. Then materials usually added at beginning of process, sometimes added at other times. Like I said, so in this example, see, at the beginning of the process and at the beginning of other processes, materials are added. Then assign in direct labor. Labor cost per process obtained from payroll register or departmental payroll summaries and record in the process account. So payroll summaries will provide the information needed to calculate direct labor, so that will be included. Then assigning manufacturing overheads. Overheads attributable to particular process should be treated as a direct charge to the process account. Like I said, overheads that are attributable to that particular process should be treated as a direct charge. Now, how should we keep or assign these manufacturing costs? Now we are going to discuss how we are going to keep accounts. Okay, these are the double entries. So let's take the same example that we mentioned here. Okay, let's say we are producing something here. Then let's keep accounts. First set of accounts are to assign manufacturing costs. Okay, we need to assign manufacturing costs. Read this. Right. So first, see, I hope you all read this. So first we are assigning these machine, sorry, raw materials, factory labor, and manufacturing overheads. Okay. So here we need to record the materials used in both processes, in machining and assembly, right? Process 1 and 2. So raw material inventory will be changed to these two processes. Likewise, for factory labor also, the values will be changed to uh, machining and assembly work in process. Next, manufacturing overhead will also be assigned to the processors, right? Once these manufacturing costs are assigned to the processors, you need to transfer them to next department, right? At the end of the period, an entry is needed to record the cost of goods transferred out of the department. So when they are transferred to the next department, what is the double entry? First, the process 1, machining, will have a credit value, right? And it will be removed and taken to the process 2, which is the assembly department, right? So that is how we keep accounts when we are transferring to the next department. Let's say after that, once it is processed, they finish completing the goods, right? So here, next we have to transfer these finished goods to the finished goods inventory. So in assembling process 2, no, we will credit the value of the goods and we will include the value in finished goods inventory. Once finished goods inventories are completed, we need to calculate the cost of goods sold. So we will debit the cost of goods sold. So once now we have finished goods here, but when we sell them, we cannot keep them more in the finished goods inventory, right? Therefore, what we can do is we have to transfer this to the cost of goods sold account, right? So there is a question. Let me open the question to you. So the flow of the costs can be calculated. So we will use this question and do the computations. Right. Now this is the question number 1, where we are going to calculate the flow of costs, right? A product passes through 3 distinct processes. Now, in the example that we discussed, there were only 2 processes, but here there are 3 processes, right? Before it is complete. Begin in the week, 500 liters of materials added to the process. 1. At the end of the week, 500 liters is produced, right? That means input is 500 liters of material and output is 500 liters. Clear? The following information is available from records. So we have materials, labor, and direct expenses used for process 1, process 2, and process 3. And there is an adjustment given for the computation of production overheads. General production overheads for the period accounted to 14,000 rupees. This is to be apportioned to various processors on the basis of wages. Remember that Now, they have decided that this overheads will be apportioned according to the basis of wages. No work in process or process stock existed at the beginning or end of the week. Okay, shall we? I will open the Excel sheet. What you all have to do is take a pen and paper and do this question with me. Now let me share the Excel. Try to do this by yourself if you can. If not, you can do this with me. Okay, now we have accounts. So we'll have one account for process one. Then another account for process two. Then another account for process three, right? Then we will have a number of units here. Then cost divided by number of units, which means per unit price and the amount. Okay, so these things will be our topics. Right. Now let's do the question. Now for process one, we have material, labor, direct expenses, right? Material, how much? They say 500 liters, 30,000 material, right? Then labor, how much? 25,000. Now we are just putting the details that are given in this question. Direct expenses, 5,000. Okay. Then what else do we have here? We have production overheads, right? Now, what is the adjustment that we have to do? Total production overhead for the whole process, all three processes, and until it becomes a finished good, it will be 14,000 rupees. Now, the condition is given. This is to be apportioned to various processes on the basis of wages, means the labor, right? So let's calculate that. Right. Let's calculate overhead costs, okay? For each processes. Process one, process two, and process three. Clear? Now that will depend on the wages. So let's take the wages here, means the labor cost, 25,000 for the first process. Then 20,000 for the second process. Again, 25,000 for the third process. Clear? Now we need to find a rate. How are we going to find a rate? How are we going to find a rate? Now we will take a total here because apportionment rate should be there. No? So these are basic mathematics, okay? Out of the total, we will see the percentage of each and every one of these wages in these processes. So let's take the first process divided by 70,000. That will be 35%, right? Then 20,000 divided by 70,000. Again, for process 3, 25,000 divided by 70,000. Clear? Let's take it to the nearest decimal place. It will be for process 1, 0.36. For process 2, 0.29. For process 3, 0.36 again. So let's allocate the overheads, right? So how much overheads? It's given 14,000, right? Total overheads. Now we need to see how much for process 1. Allocation baseless wages, no? So for process 1, we have 5,000 overhead costs. Then process 2, let's see, 4,000. Process 3, again 5,000, right? Now, along with these direct expenses, we have to put overheads as well. So for process 1, it will be 5,000. Clear? Okay. Now we have all the expenses shown here. Now let's balance the account. Take the summation. Normally, how we balance accounts? You have to balance this side. 565,000. Clear? Then to process 2, we are taking this, right? I hope you all remember that. In the double entry, the transfer of work in process. Refer to that in the table, then you will understand. 565,000. Now let's calculate per unit costs. How do you calculate? If total material cost is 30,000, we have to divide it by the number of units, right? Now here also let's calculate per unit cost. If total value is 65,000 and the number of units are 500, per unit cost will be 130. Okay, now 500 won't change because now they say input also 500, output is also 500. Then process 2. So process 2, first we take the value that we brought forward from process 1, 500 units at 130 rupees, 65,000. Clear? Now let's put the data that are given in the question. Material 15,000, labor 20,000, direct expenses 1,000. So I will just copy these 3, okay? Material how much? 15,000. Then labor 20,000. And direct expenses 1,000. What else? We have to put overheads here also. Okay. So overheads how much for process 2? Overhead cost will be 4,000. Clear? Is it clear? Up to so far, is it clear? We got the brought forward value from process 1. That is 65,000. Then we did put the direct costs and overhead costs. These costs are incurring in process 2. So again, units will be 500. Let's take the summation. That will be 87,000. Shall we take this amount to process 3 then? 500 units, we are taking 87,000. Now up to this, is it clear? Check whether you all understood how we accounted for process 1. See the double entries that are given in the tute. Okay, then you will get the proper idea. Then for process 2 also, do you all need a minute to see this before moving towards process 3? Take a minute and check whether you all have done it correctly, whether you understood this. If you did not, go back to the tute and refer the double entries, right? Right. So up to now, I hope it's clear. Now can you all try to complete this process 3 by yourselves? Try to do that. You bring the process 3 values here, brought forward values from process 2. Right? Now input data, it's very easy. Material 10,000, labor 25,000, direct expenses 5,000. Material would be 10,000. Then we have labor and so here see there are other direct expenses as well. So you have to include those. Labor and direct expenses would be 25,000 and 5,000. Then overhead costs would be 5,000 again. These are our workings, okay? So in your examination also, you have to show your workings properly because marks will be allocated for workings as well. Right, 5,000. Then let's balance this account. Sorry. So here I have accidentally input data as 2,000, right? For 20,000, I have missed a 0. Therefore, the addition was 87,000. But it should be corrected as 20,000 because in the question, labor expense is 20,000, right? So I changed these values again because the summation would change. Therefore, the brought forward value to process 3 will also change. I hope you all corrected that. So please do correct that. Right? Now, from process 3, we are taking the values to finished goods. Clear? So finished goods account, 500 units. Amount would be 150,000. Okay? Now we need to prepare the finished goods account. Right. So here, input the same data, number of units, cost per unit, and amounts. Right, now let's find out the cost per unit for all these values. This would be in process 3. At the end of process 3, that will be 300. At the beginning, 210, which means the value here will be 210, right? Now see, at the end of the first process, per unit price, per unit cost will be 130. At the end of process 2, per unit cost will be 210. At the end of process 3, per unit cost will be 300. Now finished goods. Process 3, they are coming from process 3, right? 500, 150,000. So the cost per unit will be 300. Now here, now these are in the finished good account. Once we sell these finished goods, what will happen? We will transfer this to the cost of goods sold. So we are removing the value from here and sending it to the cost of goods sold. Is it clear? Now, is this question clear? Now take a minute and try to do this by yourself without checking the answer that I discussed. Now see whether you understood this properly. Take a minute and try to do that. You have to prepare process 1 account, process 2 account, process 3 account, then finished goods account. It's very easy. Refer to the tilt and try to do it by yourself. Take a few minutes. Understanding this is very important. You can refer the tilt if you want and finish. Right, now I hope it's clear to you all. Let's go back to our tute. Right. Now we did the flow of costs, one question. Now can you understand this? This is the flow of the costs, right? According to this, we did the question, right? We answered the question according to this flow. So throughout this session, what we did was uh, building up the base to do that question, right? So if there are questions like that, you can do that. So first you assign the manufacturing costs that are given. So in our case, raw material, labor, and there are the direct costs and manufacturing overheads given. First, we mark that in our process one account. Then we transfer those values to process 2, likewise repeatedly until process 3, we transferred the accounts. Then we transfer the values to finished goods account. So once they are sold, they will be transferred to the cost of goods sold. Right? Is it clear? Now, the next part. We have accounting of normal loss, abnormal gains, and scrap. Now, first see what these terms are. What are the definitions? Just read this. So, what do you mean by a normal loss? What do you mean by a normal loss? Unavoidable loss, and it is the loss which would occur in efficient operation under normal condition. So this is something expected, right? It's unavoidable. We won't be able to avoid this loss. And it is the loss which would occur in efficient operation. No matter what we do, we won't be able to avoid this because the operation will be efficient and the conditions will be normal. But this loss would still occur. That we call the normal loss. The next term, abnormal loss. The loss in excess of normal loss is called the abnormal loss. So if there is something more than this expected or unavoidable loss, the normal loss, then that we call the abnormal loss. Anything more than the normal loss. Then we have abnormal gains, right? So abnormal gain is the gain in excess of normal loss. That means if there is a gain which is more than the normal loss, let's say the normal loss is 25,000 and we have a gain of 30,000, right? Then the abnormal gain would be 5,000. Clear? Then what do you mean by scrap? I think you all have heard of this word. Scrap means the discarded material which has some recovery value and which is either disposed of without further treatment. Let's say, for an example, we have this machine which we bought for 100,000 5 years back. Now, we cannot make production or we cannot do anything with that machine now. What we can do is we can remove that machine for scrap. We are discarding the materials. Sometimes when we are discarding these materials or these machinery, likewise these things, we might get some scrap value, right? That means we might get some value. We are giving it to someone. So we might get paid for the nuts. We might get paid for some steel or iron that are in that machine, but we won't be able to use that machine, no? We won't be able to work it. But we might be able to give it to scrap. Then they might give us some amount, maybe 10,000, 5,000 likewise amount. So that we call the scrap value, right? If we are discarding that machine properly from the business, we are removing that machine, that we call scrap. Is it clear? So you need to properly understand what normal loss is, what an abnormal loss is, what an abnormal gain is, and what do you mean by scrap. Okay, then we have some questions from these normal loss and scrap. So I will discuss that in the next lecture. So in this lecture, what we covered were, we learned about the definition of process costing. Then we talked about the similarities and differences of job and process costing. Then we identified the flow, right? Flow of costs under process costing. So we identified that, then we learned how to keep the double entries. And finally, we did a question on how to identify the flow of costs under process costing. So that question is very important for you all to understand what is happening, right? Then finally, we learned some terms like normal loss, abnormal gain, and scrap. Clear? So that is the end of this discussion. So we will have another session to complete this lecture, process costing. Okay, then thank you very much, everyone. Hope you all understood the tip. If there are any questions, if there is something that you did not understand, you can always Google it. You can always watch YouTube videos. That doesn't matter. Right? Try to gain more knowledge on these costing techniques. Right. Okay. Then we'll see you in the next lecture. Thank you very much.